afternoon and happy Sabbath, Covenant Advent Church. And good afternoon and happy Sabbath to those of you who've joined us online. Welcome back for our evening study. Thank you for joining, and I pray you'll be richly blessed. We will start with hymn number 272. Please turn your hymnals to hymn number 272. Give Me the Bible, hymn number 272. Turn the study over to Pastor Lloyd Grubb.
Good evening again, everyone, and welcome to this evening's talk as we continue with our talk on kingdom building. And what we want to be able to do is create a world, an environment that is good for ourselves. So I have a thought here I want to share, and we'll start with a short word of prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you for the blessings of this day and for the blessings, dear Lord, of rest, and to be able to take time for spiritual matters and for character building and other things like that. May you bless us, dear Father, as we go through the rest of the Sabbath for Christ's sake. Amen. So welcome again to those online and those who are here as we do our evening talk. And this evening I'm looking at creating a more social, environmentally friendly world. And so I want to talk about this when we talk about building, because as we see, whether it be from the social problems that are going on in society, or we see the environmental problems that are going on in society, that is important that for us when we're building in our own home environment, in our church, and in our community, and I'll clarify community later on, that we build in a more socially sustainable way. We build in a more environmentally sustainable, friendly way. Now, this is important to me because as I looked at, and hopefully I'm going to explain why it's important to you to consider this. As I looked at the various different disasters, both socially, when I say socially, with violence and all that, and environmental disaster, financial disasters that are going on, I've been thinking a lot about how the generation before, the choices that they make, good or bad, and how it is affecting them, that they've created a world that they have to live in. and how it's important for us in this generation, as we are looking forward to their age, to consider how we do life and prepare life so that we can live in the world that we create for ourselves. If we create a world for ourselves that it's going to be painful, especially when we're older, then it becomes a problem. So we want to live in a way that we consider what it is like for us as we get older, and make sure that the world that we create is kind to us. Because I've looked at some of the decisions that were made by people that either worship within the past, work within the past, or live amongst. And I conclude that they did not create a world that is kind to themselves when they get older. It might be fine for them when they're younger, but it will not be, and it is definitely not a kind world when they get older. They did not build in this way. And so we want to be able to have a kinder, less destructive world when it comes on to, as I say, environmentally or socially. And I'll clarify more as I go along. So we actively seek, as I was saying this morning, imagine and apply new solutions to life's known challenges. And so when we look at these things that we talk about kingdom building, what we're talking about is that all these challenges are known to us. And we keep in mind, aging, getting older is a known challenge. We're not facing it full on right now, but as we get older, we face it more. And we have to ask ourselves the question, what do we do and how will we build, knowing that we're going to have to face this known challenge if life continues and Jesus Christ doesn't come next year or next week or whatever. What happens if I have to live to see an older age? How would I curate my life, and how would I encourage you so that we can have a community around us that to live in a more kind way? And when I say community, I clarify how I view community. And I say it up front. If ever you hear me use the word community, we all live in communities. But when we come on to people who have a certain belief system, like church people, that becomes our community. So when we talk about community, for me, community mean my church family, and separately the community that I live in. In Proverbs chapter 6, verse 6 through 8. Proverbs 6, verse 6 through 8. So here, the psalmist, I say normally the psalmist, but the writer of Proverbs, encourages us to consider the ant. Now, why we consider the ant? Because we too know that it is a known established fact that we start life in the spring, so to speak. Then when we are young and in our 20s and 30s, we're in our summer of life. Probably in the 40s if you have some health. We make our most money at that point. We develop in our careers, but there come a point where we start hitting our fall. And depends on if you have strength, you could be hitting your fall in the 40s or you could be hitting it in the 50s. And then after you get into the 60s and 70s, you're really in the winter of life. And so the work that you work now is you're trying to be like the squirrels and be like the ant, to collect for the fall and for the winter of life. That's a known problem. And I'm amazed that when I listen to legislators, they talk as if they're never going to get old and they're not supposed to do life this way. I live in a town that is it's a high rate of elderly in the town. But the way they do life, there's no step-down properties. You have single-family homes that dominate the town. And there's not a lot of option for people to step down and get a smaller, more sustainable, modest home. They have to literally leave the area, so they have not built retirement-type homes for the older people. And I think this is a very heavy mistake that older people make when they control these towns. Because I know the aim is they want to keep out the riffraff, probably, or the poor people. But by doing so, they end up keeping themselves out when they get older. They get caught into their own trap. So if I was talking to my community, I would say, consider zoning some areas for lower income, not necessarily to target poor people, but to target yourself. So when you get older, if you have to spend as much money for taxes, you don't have to spend as much money for maintenance, for heating, for other utilities, you can come to a step-down house that is cheaper and smaller. But it's hard to sometimes communicate this to these people because they're so committed to their ways because they think, I'm always going to make this type of money. And the fact of the matter, they're not going to make this type of money all their life. And so that's the thing. So we prepare for the winter. But I see many people that come in to prepare for winter. So if they're not going to do it, I'm imploring you, consider what you're doing now and how your life is going to be in the fall of life and in the winter of life. Verse 6 says, go to the ant, Proverbs chapter 6. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, and consider his ways and be wise, which having no guide or overseer, he don't have no mayor, he doesn't have no governor, no state representative, and be wise, which having no guide or overseer, provide her meat in the summer and gather her food in the harvest. The harvest, normally we reap in summertime or we reap in the harvest, which is this time of the year. This time of the year is when we soon, within a month, a little bit over a month from now, we will celebrate the harvest, which we call it Thanksgiving in America. But the harvest comes with a lot of food that are geared towards storage for winter, or food that are geared towards high vitamin C for winter. So yes, we're supposed to be more sensible than the ant, because the ant work off what I would call instinct, as I'm saying that right. But we are intelligent beings, and we're supposed to know that this is the time of the year to consume as much vitamin C, because the winter is going to be cold, it's going to be hard on the body. This is the time of the year now for life, now for aging, that's similar to harvest when you're making most of your money in the 30s and 40s. It's not the time to burn that money, it's time to put away some of that money, because when you start getting older, that money is going to come in handy. But many people are not like ant. The known problem, they don't curate life for that problem. But for you here listening to me, we're not going to be like the dumb people in the society, because we're supposed to be children of the book, of the Bible. We want to be able to be sensible and know that when you're in the time when you're making money, in the summer of life, you start to prepare for the fall and you prepare for the winter. And when you do this, life is better. So notice it says here, he has no guide nor no overseer, but is sensible because he's listened to his creator. And he provide meat in the summer and gather her food in the harvest. So again, in this time of the year, the harvest produce a lot of soy, corn, wheat, produce a lot of pumpkin. They're not for decoration, they're for food. It produces a lot of potato, all that stuff. And normally, if it wasn't for refrigeration and stuff, the people store it up to last them through the summer or through the winter. That's how God did or does life. The spring happens, everything comes to life. Then the tree have their green leaves, they blossom, and they bear more than you can partake. Because how nature works, it produces it so that when you get it in the fall, in harvest, and in the end of summer, you can store some of it up to last you through the winter when nothing is growing. Well, that's how our life is. And so our life is like that, so we got to do life like that and consider that when we start hitting certain age, we start having to think about, what do I do with myself when I get older? No matter what the society is doing, we must do it. And I'm going to tell you, just in case you say, oh, Lloyd, that is something you want to talk about. No, this is so important that, remember, most pension plans disappeared. And so what the government is doing now, literally right now, is that they have bills working out in Congress and Senate where they're talking about changing the retirement plans when they come on to IRA or 401k, because they want to be able to make people be able to save up for it, because many Americans are ending at 65 facing retirement, and the only thing they have going into retirement is Social Security. And so this is a problem. So just in case you don't understand, I'm always current event. I'm just telling you, this is a problem. But most people do not realize that there's a problem. Because think about what's going on with inflation. Inflation is eating up so much of money that the government has decided to up the amount of money goes to retirees and Social Security. So that's one thing. And so because of that, you understand that, so we need to be thinking in this matter. And so as a community, we need to be thinking this way. Make sure you're putting away some of your acorns, like the squirrel, or do like the ant, because retirement is coming. In Genesis 1, few quick texts for thought. Genesis 1 verse 31. And God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was good. Was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. In Genesis 2 verse 15, and the Lord took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So when you think about this, like, the Lord made the garden, God himself, the creator of the world, the creative being, where we get our creativeness from. And after he made it and he says, very good, then he said to Adam and Eve, to Adam really said, dress it. So that tells you that within each of us, the possibility of dressing and keep it, and we have displayed this in the earth through inventions, is phenomenal what a human being can do, the solutions that we can come. This is how God created us. Part of our fulcrum of life, part of where we find our center, is when we center in Jesus, realize he's a creative God. And he creates us that we can take something that's beautiful and make it and dress it. He can take something that's very good and dress it. That means if you're in a situation, you can make your situation better. You can improve your situation. You can increase your situation to be better, even if it's good. There's always more. Remember, the person that had 5 talents, God says, here's 5. And he made 5 more. That's an expectation. That tells you that God, if God said, here's 1 talent, God expects you to increase it. So when God made the Garden of Eden, say it was 10 talents. He said to Adam, make it 20. So I'm always fascinated by what ability that I have that I might not be using, where God says, you can take anything, Lloyd, or whoever your name is, and you can dress something that's already good. You can improve. And I'm always impressed when somebody improves a technology. Because the technology was already mature, and somebody say, I can add something to that. And when you see that, you're like, oh, that's impressive, right? Because what they do, they dress it. They keep it. So some of what I want to talk about here in this afternoon is to encourage you that whatever you have, you can improve on it. There's things you can do. There's things I'm doing. That's what I'm trying to do to improve on what I already have. And I read those 2 texts to you to encourage you that we were created with this ability, that even what God made, which somebody said you can't improve upon God. And God told Adam, that's not my opinion. God says, dress it. You'll see what I do, and I think it's good. And God says, do something with that. So that tells you, whatever you see there, God said you can do something with it. In Psalm chapter 8, verse 1 through 5. Psalm chapter 8, verse 1 through 5. Notice here, and the Lord God, O Lord, our God, Psalm chapter 8, verse 1 through 5. I won't read the whole chapter. Notice here, O Lord, our God, how excellent is thy name in all the earth, who has set thy glory above the heavens. So this is a statement of fact when we look in the heavenly, up above. Out of the mouth of babes and suckling hast thou ordained strength because of thine enemies, that thou mightest still the enemy and the avenger. When I consider thy heavens, the works of thy fingers, the moon and the star which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angel, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. We are created for glory, and we're created for honor. So we're created to take whatever we have and to make it better. I know there's people who have a mindset that you shouldn't really adopt new technologies, you shouldn't adopt new inventions, new methodology. But I always say as life moves on, there's adjustments to life. And you adapt with the changes, you implement the changes, and you improve on what you have. Because what you're doing, you're trying to create a world that is better. So if I'm looking at a problem, I'm saying, look, I can see the older people ahead of me, they didn't do church a certain way. They didn't do life a certain way. I can sit back and follow them because they're going on to perdition and they didn't get the success. I want to be able to get the success. So when we talk about life, right, before I go to any more texts, when we talk about life, we're talking about that life has certain different sections of life that we deal with. which normally we say these are our core dynamics of life, the core parts of life that we have to deal with. And I say them for you. There's different ways that they're described. And so these different quadrants of life that we deal with. Well, first one I always say spirituality. Spirituality is important. That's why to me the concept of church is important, because I didn't want to do church the way the previous generation did church. I want to do church the way I think the church should be done. Education become important. Remember, all of this is, we're looking at that important aspect of life, that if you constantly work to develop these aspects of life, that your life will become better as we live in this life. Health is another major aspect of life. Finance, the financial part of our life, important. Career, what you do for trade, job, career, your expression of your skills and ability. Security. Environment, as my topic is. When I say environment, I mean it socially. All these are part of the environment. Community, social, and recreational. Different lists, if you look at different lists, different people name it whatever they name it. But these are different aspects of our lives that are all part of our complex life that we live. And in this complex life, what I believe is that when you take each of them, and I'll go back over that list again, I have some more text I want to read. We take each of these things, and if you look at it, you say this is part of what build a community, build a family. And you work hard at all of these things. What you find is your life is of greater value. Notice finance is just one part of that. As I say, it takes a little bit of money to go to the library and get a book and read. So you can still be educated and never sign up for a college. I was talking to Brother Green this week, and he made me know that I didn't even realize that it costs, retail-wise, it costs about $70-something thousand a year to go to Princeton, and $75,000 a year to go to Harvard, to get an education for 4 years. But if somebody say, I can't get an education otherwise, you can. You could just go to the library and start getting books in one category, and you can read yourself into a PhD. Nobody would have conferred a PhD on you, but you can read your book. You can go online and pay $100 and something or so per book, and you can buy textbook that are used in colleges on a certain subject and read yourself into everything to do with the body, everything to do with finance. You can take any topic. Well, the thing is, you know the topic now, but you don't have a degree. Nobody didn't certify you that you have learned. But you could take any topic, right? And you can just go on Amazon. I was going to say Borders, but they don't exist anymore, I think. They don't exist anymore. And you can take and you can develop yourself. And so when we're talking about life and talking about creating an environment, part of that environment is your education. Part of the environment is the more educated the society is the better the society functions. They still need Jesus, because that's where the spirituality comes in. So we want to create that world, because we look back at a lot of the problems that we look back in the past and say, why did the world function the way it functioned? Is because there was not certain education was done. Why did the church was a certain way? Because the spirituality, the character of the church was not the focus. They were more focused on worship. So we want to be able to create that world. And so I'm going to come back to this, but I throw that out there first because I want you to think about that. I want to think about that and say, what can we do and what should we be doing in each of these sections of life, each of these categories of life, these, what they call, there's another name for it, I forget what they call it, that you do, and when you do this, life becomes better. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 27 through 30. Matthew chapter 9, verse 27 through 30. When we think about this here now. So notice here, Matthew chapter 9, verse 27 through 30. And Jesus departed thence, and 2 blind men followed him, crying, saying, Thou Son of David, have mercy on us. And when he was come into the house, the blind men came to him. And Jesus said unto them, Believe ye that I am able to do this? They said unto him, Yea, Lord. So notice this goes back again to me to that Genesis text. Do you believe that this is possible? Yea, Lord. Okay. What does the Lord says? And their eyes were open, and Jesus straightly charged them, saying, see that no man know it. Was there other people that were blind? Why didn't they get the healing? These two men believe it. So here's where I believe is unto your faith. You create the life you want to curate for yourself. You get your result based upon your faith. I realized in the past where, say, if I said something and somebody had a problem with it, the problem wasn't what I said. The problem was it was unto my faith and it was unto their faith. Their problem, what I was saying, was they couldn't see it because they didn't believe it. But if I believe a certain way, then I believe that there's some results can come. I pray and I work, like I was saying this morning. So notice here, they believe, and the Lord had to question them. So you believe I can do this? Like, you know, who gave you this idea I can do this? Oh, you believe I can do this? Okay, it's unto your faith. No, other people are blind, they didn't believe it, they didn't get the healing. So when we talk about evil community, because that's part of our existence, we live in a community. Well, we have to remember that you could be in a community, and like how I live, I'm in my community, but I'm not in my community fully. And I clarify. In many areas in America, you can just be in a community. You live in a community, but you almost have no interaction with the community, other than you pay taxes. And you have a community outside the community, in the sense that you have connections outside that you belong to, like we would say a faith community, right? So my community is smaller than my community because my community is you online and those in the church. So I bounce off that community, thoughts, ideas, what they're doing, what I'm doing, because I want to get results better than the community I'm living in. Now, I value the community I live in because that's why I chose to live there. I didn't live there, go there by accident. I look for a community. But it's unto your faith. If you believe that you can have a certain experience, then you go after that. As an example now, we go down now to Genesis chapter 18, verse 17. So now this is my main text here. Genesis chapter 18, verse 17 through 19. So when you think about this now, right here, Genesis chapter 18, verse 17 through 19. Think about this now. So Abraham, we'll say, is the father of the faithful. And he believed. But when you think about this, Abraham created a different household and community around himself and got a taste of the promised land. What do you think about that? I ask you to think about that because what I just said, just in case you didn't get what I just said, probably it's the first time you ever heard it. I've never heard this before. So I'm saying it. I want you to think about that. Because my topic again is creating a more socially and environmentally friendly world. So Abraham, around himself, created a world, so to speak, based upon his faith and his belief in his God. And all these things, including security, was part of that. And Abraham, although he was living per se in an area, in a town, but he was kind of separated from the town. He had his own town. And Joy says there was at least about 1,000 people, which are what she says you can calculate from the Bible. She's right. He was able to saddle, I think, over 300 men, young men. So if you calculate that, you could see easily there's over 1,000 people with Abraham. So when we say household, we often could miss that Abraham's household could have fighting men, a fighting age we're talking about, over 300. So Abraham had a small town. The town I'm in right now is probably only 2,500 or 3,500. So Abraham had 30% of the town as his church. So Abraham didn't have a mega church, but he was close. You could have one Sabbath school, in other words. So here you have Abraham, right? And Abraham had created around himself an environment that was opposite to the environment that Lot had. Lot didn't create his own environment. Lot went into a pre-existing environment that ended up becoming a risk to his life and ended up getting burnt to the ground. So when we're talking about an environment and community building or kingdom building, we want to think like Abraham. Because the results from Abraham shows you that although Abraham lived in the promised land as a foreigner, so to speak, he had an environment around him where he was not getting the result of the Sodomites. And he was not living life of them. And yet he had security, he had all of that thing that we're going to go over in a second. Let's read what the Bible said, what God said about Abraham. Notice here, Abraham spoken about in Genesis 18, verse 17 through 19. Notice here. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham the thing which I do? What was the Lord going to do? He's going to burn down Sodom. What was Sodom? An environment that had a lot of money, but it was filled with rapists and murderers. And people who were gluttonous and people who were lazy. But yet they had some money because they were in a fruitful plain. The environment was fruitful, but they were living a very terrible lifestyle, what they call a Sodomite lifestyle. Abraham chose not to live amongst them. Abraham lived, pulled back away amongst his own compound, so to speak. Lot moved in town, and Lot end up poorer, and Lot end up with a messed up life and pure dead bodies. So as we see these disasters rolling, as we see these problems happening, we must consider how we set ourselves up. Because not only set ourselves up, we're going to have, unless things come to an end real quick, we're going to be seeing the gray hairs like Abraham. We got to look how we set ourselves up. And look the influence that we have amongst those who are amongst us, so they don't get dragged into the Sodomite lifestyle. Notice here, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Why? Because Abraham did the right thing. What does it say? For I know him. This is not now subjective. It's not an opinion. This is God is saying. God is saying, listen, I know this. I know even his thoughts. I know Abraham, how he conduct himself. For I know him that he will command his children and his household after him. And they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice, as we talked about this morning, and judgment. And that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. So God said, God prophesied over Abraham, and Abraham was going to bring it to pass. Abraham was consistent to even what God said about him. How often God sing over us, prophesy over us, and we go the opposite direction to curse ourselves. How many people have known they have bolted and gone to places to get cursed? Their life did not progress after they moved away because they didn't see the importance of a faith community. They didn't see the importance of belonging to a faith community. And they go on and life has been stagnant or messing up. See about Abraham, the people in Abraham, notice to clarify, he just didn't say in Abraham's, how did he say here? He just didn't say in Abraham, children, right? He says his children and his household after him. And when we talk about his household, Andrew, I said he was commanded head of households. This is not a household as, you know, somebody have a maid and a butler and probably somebody that work in the yard. And so that's probably whatever. This is over 1,000 people. Command and got blessed and didn't get cursed and messed up. So when we are creating an environment, we want to be able to think that what are we doing? What are we building? What type of environment are we building? And somebody said, but you live in America here, you live in a country that every war they're involved in, so they're cursing themselves. I get that. And we see the curse, but Abraham was living among the Canaanites. So that argument is muted. Right? Abraham was living amongst the Canaanites. If anybody was living among the people that was hell-bent on destroying himself, he was Abraham. And yet he was blessed, and he commanded his household, and he created an environment within amongst those Sodomites and the Girgashites and the Perizzites and all these people who are, you know, they're into a bestiality and everything. Hello, we're here. You know, this is where we live. But Abraham was not leading his family and household down that bestial lifestyle way. So if you're here in America, any place where it's just gang violence and bad, you can curate your own reality and receive that blessing that Abraham received because you believe. Somebody said, Lloyd, I don't believe it's possible. Well, unto your faith, I believe it's possible. Hence, why you watching me and I'm independent of the corporate church? Because you'll never hear this in a corporate church. I don't think so. Possibly, but I don't think so. Never heard it. So notice here, when we think about what Abraham, again, I repeat what I just said here. Abraham created a different household and community around himself and got a taste of the promised land. Because remember, what is Israel and what is the promised land? The promised land was the lifestyle that Abraham was already living while he was in the promised land, not here of the promised land. All they were going to try to do is duplicate Abraham's liberty and lifestyle. Does that make sense? Right? That's all they were going to do. It was just going to be the whole nation. So when you think about that, Abraham did receive the promise in his household amongst those 1,000 people. They were living as Jews, so to speak. Had the security, had the separation, they had the worship, they were a blessing to the world. Abraham blessed the sojourners that come through. And yet Abraham was living amongst the Canaanites. So keep that in mind. So when we look at this and I ask you the question, if I ask you this question, if you're creating an environment and the environment you're creating, you're thinking 20, 30 years off, when you're hitting 65, 70, how would I want my life to be in spirituality, in all these different things? Then that's what you want to start working towards. I'm putting the question to you. You might never thought about it. But what would be your setup? How would you want your life to set up in these areas? I'm going to go back over the areas right now. What would you do now, and you should be doing now, so to set your life up for when you hit 65, 70, 75? How would you want your life to be? Because based upon that answer, based upon what you're supposed to start doing now and start working towards, and based upon that question and the answer is how you can see why some of those discussions never had, and you have people in our society now, they live in a world where they're getting beat down, but they're getting beat down and now they're 65, 70. And they just never thought about this. Never even attempt. They just floating through life, and whenever it happened and whatever happened, it's happened. But remember, as I say, remember the ant. He collects and set up himself for the winter because he collects in the harvest. Because in the winter, he has to use up the food that he had collected. When we get older, we're going to need these things. So first thing, spirituality. Question to you. Whatever church would you want to belong to as you get older? Whatever faith community would you want to belong to as you get older? Whatever faith community you want to connect with as you get older. Have you considered this? Because probably that's the community you need to develop. Because to the merciful, God going to show you mercy. Reap what you sow is cause and effect. Whatever church community would you want to belong to? You want to belong to a church community that take care of the old people? That without provocation, not knowing what I'm preaching this afternoon, we go and visit the old person and bring them some food? All right? Just to kind of set me up for the sermon kind of thing. Instead of me setting them up, they set them up. What kind of faith community do you want to belong to? Because there's a lot of people making moves, and I'm seeing them moving here, moving there, but then I consider, what am I doing? Is this a right move I'm making? Am I making an Abraham move? Or am I making a Lot move? Or I'm just making a move, I haven't even ever thought about it. Why do I live in where I live? Because again, when I was in my 20s, I would not think about this. And I look at, as I say, in even my community and some of the people I live amongst, I realize they never thought about this. How would I want life to be when I get older? When I'm more vulnerable? When I'm more susceptible to environment? Do I want to take my last retirement money and buy a house on the Gulf? 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet away from the water. So if the storm comes, whatever, I lose everything. Is that a wise move? Now, I'm not saying a young person can't do that, because that's the whole idea of being young. You're supposed to be young and foolish, right? But is that good for a retiree to do with their retirement money? Does that make sense? So these are the things that I'm thinking about for myself personally, in a spiritual, whatever church community you want to build, what type of environment. Because somebody could say, Lloyd, I want to belong to a church that just praise the Lord all the time. Is that going to work for you when you're 80? Because almost, I remember this pastor dealt with that, it was in the praise and worship, and he said, really, young people do well in Pentecostalized praise and worship churches, but old people don't do well in them. They have no much value to them. Because when you're young, you're invincible. You're not thinking about these things. A young person wouldn't see much value in what I'm preaching here. Because I'm talking about something that, we're talking about retirement. I don't think about that. We just need to praise the Lord. Now I have energy. I'm never going to die. Right? That's a young person. As I said, young and foolish. But the sooner you start thinking about these things, well, it's better to start thinking about this when you're 21. Because you could have better health going through life. Then you start thinking about this when you're 61. And you start thinking probably now is the time to get a juicer. Now is the time to start learning to exercise. Oh man, it's going to be hard then. Better do it now. Education. If I'm asking you, how will you want to do life? You want to do life, you go through life, and you keep learning through life. So as you get older and you have less energy and less strength and stamina, you use wisdom and knowledge to take to balance things out. Because when you're younger, you're going brute force. But as you get older and the body's not getting stronger, you want education to balance things off. So you can level it off. So you're not going through life through brute force, you're going through life through being wise. So I encourage you, think about, you need more financial education, you need more health education. What do you need to be? And that again will come back again to what kind of church you belong to. Because somebody say, for me, when I'm talking, more I talk, I'm more thinking, well, I guess I would benefit an older person more than I benefit a younger person. Because I say a younger person has no value. Cancer, if I'm talking about cancer, a younger person, like, what's that? Until they're dead of cancer. Health. What are you doing with your health? Because health becomes very valuable as we get older, when we start to creak, like that door that needs some oil. And you're thinking probably I need to hit my knees with some WD-40. The health message becomes so much more valuable. Because when you're younger, you have some health. So you can abuse the body and foolishly lose the health. But we need to create a world that is kinder for ourselves. Because when we get older, what we do today, health-wise, is going to be important for us coming up. And if I can put off the beat down 5 years, 10 years, that's worth the effort. Right? It's worth the effort. So I'm encouraging you, consider, when was the last you read a book on health? Just if you don't, you say, Lloyd, I don't really know what book to read on health. Go buy a book go on Amazon, find the best book on natural ways to deal with inflammation. I don't know a book about that. I'm just giving it as an example. Since when you get older, you have to deal with inflammation. As I said, the joints need greasing. Go find a book that's going to grease your joints. And go read, and then come and educate me. Tell me what you learn. And what you take from that book and what you start doing to probably start juicing, taking some ginger shot. I'll be impressed with you if you do some ginger shot. I know some churches say, Lloyd, I'm more interested in prayer warriors. I'm more interested for you to get some ginger shot and some turmeric shots. That's more important for me. That's going to answer a lot of your prayers when you start feeling pain. Housing, as I intimated earlier and referenced to earlier. What are you doing when you consider your housing? My wife asked me this question recently. When is it a good time to downgrade? And somebody said, you guys, Lloyd, you're not that old. Why are you talking about downgrade? I don't know how I look today. Probably I look older on camera today. But need more sleep. But why you really having that discussion? Because we talk about this stuff. Because we see other people who are older than us, and it seems like downgrading their housing situation, if they're already upgraded, were forced upon them. In other words, if you have a two-story home, I know you're thinking probably I need to have a one-story house. I don't need to climb these stairs. Don't wait until you have a knee surgery to do it. Start thinking, yeah, when did I do that? Or do I need to uncut my house so I can move around it? Because I don't need all this junk anyhow in my house. I need my house to be nice, clean, and organized. These things you sort of think about. Because what it is, as I said, intimated in the sermon earlier, when you talk about modesty, we want modesty to describe all the ways through our lives. As I say, I don't believe in the cheapest, and I don't believe in the most expensive. Definitely don't believe in the most expensive. But I believe that I say what I have I like to buy things that they tell me at least I get a 2-year warranty. I recently bought a dehumidifier and they gave me a year. And I was thinking, okay, I guess they don't have too much confidence in the product to last long. And I started checking that most dehumidifiers last a year or two. Warranty, I should say. So I say, okay, I guess this one, they don't give out a warranty. But most things you start thinking about, okay, how long it's going to last? Because that's how it multiplies. If it's going to last 10 years, that means I divide 10 into the cost. And I say, okay, that's what it costs me per year. But housing, right? How are you thinking about housing? Where are you going to set your head like Abraham? Are you going to live? Because you have to consider all these things as you're getting older, because you need to put yourself in a situation that at least you can live out, if not the whole part, but a part of your retirement, just in case we live long enough that you could be going to nursing home. How do you take care of yourself like that? And if you're going to be in your house for a while, and you could say, I'm going to retire in my house, have you set your house up for retirement? Are you putting some money into it? Because that's what you're going to be seeing most of the time in your life. Right? You're going to be getting up, and that kitchen is going to be your kitchen, that bathroom is going to be your bathroom. Have you set it up? Because I say a lot of people don't think ahead of these things. And when it comes, they're panicking. That's why I'm having this discussion. And again, I'm watching these videos down south, and I'm thinking, some of these people, I hope that was not all their retirement money in the house. Because I don't know how you could put their retirement money house in the highest time. That for young people, as I say, is young and foolish. And they shouldn't be foolish, but that kind of go with being young. They don't think these things can happen because they're young, they're invincible. But we know that that's not life. Your financial situation. Again, you either make more money or you downgrade. Or you can't downgrade because you downgrade enough. Because I know some people, they downgrade so much that they're going to die. The only thing they need to do is figure out how to make more money. So somebody let's say, Lloyd, I'm in my 60s now. I can't make no more. I'm heading to retirement. Well, probably now it's now time to juice and eat some healthy so you can give yourself 5 more years of work. Does that make sense? You're using to balance out, to take the negative and try to balance it out and make it a positive. So if you're listening to me at 65, you'll be like, man, I'm not really set up for retirement. Well, probably you have to start thinking about a part-time job, right? Some way to start to make some money, to start to do some other thing, to set yourself up a certain way. But it's Lloyd said, I can't do a part-time job. I'm too beaten up right now. But probably now it's time for you to embrace the help message. Because now you're going to give yourself an advantage that you never had, so you can get yourself set up. Because, as I say, I'm watching, and just in case you don't understand the vibe of what I'm saying, which hopefully you listen to me, you know, it's such a critical situation because of COVID and inflation and all this war and tariffs with Russia and China that America is playing. People's cost of living is going up, not just in America. I'm watching something and they say probably 80% increase in Turkey, cost of living. That means if you're making $100 now, it's equivalent to making like $20. Probably my calculation is wrong, but you get the point, right? And so your buying power from your income has just disappeared because of inflation. And so we don't know where tomorrow brings, but what we know is that we can control certain costs. Because if you own, say, your own home, and you can still pay for the taxes and maintenance, and you live in it, even if the cost of housing goes up, your cost of housing remains the same except for taxes. It's true, right? So you've controlled that inflation, but now you have to put all that money into the house. But you have to consider these things. A person who owns their home, yes, they could have sold the house, but as long as they stay in that house in the last 2 years, their cost of living, inflation-wise, went up only a little bit, probably just for maintenance and taxes. And taxes didn't raise that much this year, because I got my tax bill a week ago, and it didn't go up that much. I think the tax bill normally come out in September. Right? How about yours? It didn't go that much up, right? Not much, right? So inflation didn't hit the taxes, at least not yet. But inflation hit food and other things. But that's where you sort of consider buying bulk. Buying this, you know, there's things you do because what you're trying to do is you're trying to maintain a certain level of life. And I'll say not an exorbitant life, and you're not trying to bake bread, but you're trying to maintain a certain level of life and maintain a consistency in the midst of all the shaking. This is why I believe Abraham's experience was different from the experience that the Lot and the Sodomites were living. You don't want to be caught up into that. You want to think ahead because they're just being dragged through life. And they're not thinking why these things are happening. We want to accept that, listen, more storms are coming. Things are coming. What are you going to do? Again, in a financial situation, you want to think that says, no, the financial situation is very unstable. As we see, if the government is considering changing the rules about 401k, because if you have not been paying attention, most people 401k took a massive hit in the last we had October, so the last 10 months, or really started in July. So they're now looking between now and December to change the rule before the Congress and Senate go on recess to change the rules to do with investments with 401k, because they want to shore up the 401k or give more options because people are losing so much money because of the financial turmoil that's going on in the country. So one has to start considering the other things I'm talking about, because what it is, your retirement is based more upon just what you're taking in. It's how you set up your life with the money you currently have or the money you're currently making. Hopefully that makes sense. Career is good. If you can, I always say you can probably do a new career every 10 years in America and in most Western countries, and even if you're abroad, depends on what you're doing. And because you have this massive move to online, it's good to always keep an option that you can work from home in some kind of capacity. Because again, if you hit retirement and you will be able to make a certain amount of money part-time but not have to basically do something physical, like physical be a job, then that's a good thing. Also expressing your skills and ability, that's a very good thing to consider and to do. If you can express your skills and ability in different ways, then this is good. I want you to think about this, because, and somebody say, am I talking to somebody retired already? No, I'm talking to somebody that's pre-retirement. That's retirement is probably 20 years off. I remember I would go to business seminars, and they would say that it's good for somebody in their 20s and 30s to consider these things. And I was like, man, but retirement is so far off. But remember, if I'd started more seriously then, even though there've been ups and downs and market crashes and stuff like that, you'll be further along, because every time things crash, they come back and they crash. Things go along, it's oscillate. And as it oscillates, you want to be able to kind of ride that wave. So keep that in mind. Security. Where you live is important. Notice Abraham lived in a place where security was easier to accomplish. But Abraham didn't depend only on the physical location and the 300 or so men that could arm themselves within his household. Abraham also had confederates, he had connection with other people. So that's why I believe it's not just we talking here, we're talking about community and the faith community, but the physical community you live in. How safe is the community you live in? You want to be able to put the odds in your favor, the probability in your favor, to make sure that you live in a place that at least is more secure. That would be Abraham confederating with the other men. Just in case you know the story, I'm not going to go to the text and show you. And then himself had his own physical security in the sense of the location that he lived in, although he was connected with other people. And notice again, Abraham seemed to be, the Bible doesn't clarify much about his connection with Melchizedek, the king of Salem. Because remember, Salem was still an area that had someone like a Melchizedek, but at the time, although he had Melchizedek there, it was still considered a Canaanite region, and it was a very rough, as I said, part of town to live in, or area, country to live in. So somehow the spiritual person in that amongst the Canaanite seemed to be a friend of Abraham. So Abraham spiritually was connected with probably the most righteous man at that time outside of Abraham. Because, and then the Bible says, actually, he seemed to be greater than Abraham because Abraham paid tithe to him of the spoils. And that's what later on the New Testament speak to. So Abraham was connected with some kings in the area. He was connected with some spiritual people in the area, Melchizedek primarily I'm talking about. And so Abraham's security was multifaceted. Just keep that in mind. That was the whole discussion. I would have to flesh it up, but there's a lot of thoughts in my mind. But for the sake of time, I can't go into it. Environment, the environment you live in. As I say, I don't believe in putting myself in certain physical environments. Because I always say I don't want to live nowhere that I can step off of my bed at the middle of the night and step off into 4 feet of water. That's just my choice. I can vacation in those areas, but not live in those areas. Because as I say, if a storm is coming, I don't want to lose it in the middle of the night and drown in my bed or something like that. But when we look back at what a lot of the choices the older generation did, the environmental concerns were not so much important to them. In their mind, it seems that if you're into environmental anything, you must be a hippie or a Greenpeace type of person. Is that true? That's what I grew up hearing, right? They made it that said you were some nut or some crazy person, and taking care of the environment was some liberal dream, some liberal philosophy. Also, when I was younger, I remember the older people talk about anybody into health as if they're hippie again, and they're fanatics, and they're extremists. And they're paying a heavy price for that. Heavy price for that. Now, you can go into the store, and you're not a crazy person, and you see shelves of different type of milk alternative, ice cream alternative, whipped cream, sour cream, something cheese, whatever that cheese is, cream cheese, and fake meat and fake burgers. And before, you would have to be an absolute nut, and the people who are just about to die of cancer, from colon cancer and all these different cancers, will look at you as nuts and crazy. You're being weird. So in environmental laws, they resisted. And you think about it, in America, the place that died from the most suicide and the most type of obesity-related diseases are still the red states that are most aggressive against anything natural. And they look at anybody into health as being liberal and nuts. But that is changing because of the deaths. Or they're just dying off because they're circling the wilderness for 40 years. We can't be like that. We got to be honest with ourselves and realize that it's better to take care of your colon. It's serious. Don't die of colon cancer. It's not necessary. And if you're going to die of colon cancer, at least eat healthy to hold it back. So if you're going to die at 40 of colon cancer, die at 50. At least you get 10 more years because you start juicing and eating some vegetables. If you didn't go 100% vegan, but at least eat some vegetables. Come on now. So the same principle with health was applied to nature. And yet we see nature is revolting because we have damaged the planet, burned all this carbon, and the people who are most aggressive against anything health is most also aggressive against anything natural. They're going to die of some tornado, hurricane, or some flood or so, but they refuse to do anything because they think it's something to do with the liberals. It's a conspiracy. It's something to do with the Pope. We have a lot of Adventists who they'll say, oh, it's the Pope, it's the papacy, something to do with the papacy. And that's what they will say. And they will not do anything to do with, because it's a conspiracy. It's a plan to get in the national Sunday law. Very silly people we live amongst. But we can't be like the Sodomites. We can't be like the Gomorrites. We can't be like the regular Perizzites and Hittites and Hivites and Canaanites. We got to be like Melchizedek, a Jebusite, the Sites. But he was a worshiper of the Most High God. We have to be like Abraham. Almost there, the community. The community that you live in, as I say, I encourage you belong to us if you're into this mindset. If you don't jibe with this, don't belong to us. But if you like this type of stuff, you need to belong to a faith community that is us or like us, who think in this type of manner. Because community, as I say to you, is beyond the community that I physically live. My community, as I say, is those online and those that are here. It's my community. People I can have this conversation with. People going to be into where they live, solar panel, renewables, not damaging the environment, taking care of the body, that type of stuff. That's the thing I'm not into the crazy people who are talking about they're not going to do anything natural, or they're not going to cut back their energy costs, like burn, baby, burn. Let's drive 8 cylinders that are small little electric car can run left with no effort. I'm not into that. So I'm going to tell you, I embrace it. I don't follow the foolishness. I think these are demonic or stupid people. As I say, the worst way I can say to talking about, if you do anything natural, it's you're part of some conspiracy. So if you're listening to me, you believe it's a conspiracy, then you wouldn't listen to me anymore. All right, we're good with that. I'm not into that community. I'm in a different community. Our principle here is preparation for life and eternity. We still have to live on this earth. And until Christ comes, we're not supposed to damage the earth. Christ says when he comes, he will destroy those who destroy the earth. So as I say, you figure that one out. Christ comes, and one of the main aim is coming is those who destroy the earth, he's going to destroy them. So somehow, that's some liberal thought. That's not liberal, that's revelation. These people say they study prophecy. They don't study no prophecy. Ignorant. So we don't do that. We want to belong to a community that, especially when we get older, this is going to become important. If I get older, I want to spend less for energy. If I get older, I want to eat food that's going to destroy my body less. It's going to be more organic and natural. Unless I run to options, I almost always buy organic and naturally grown. Because guess what? I'm not intending to eat all this poison and chemical. That's the older generation. They were into that chemical. They like to poison themselves and look like they're poisoned. We can't do that anymore. It's not working. Social. We got to build social community. As I say, almost every church I went to, they were not social communities. I actually worship with people that if the church was too friendly, they said this church is a social club. And I say, you got out there when the wolves eat you. You're being silly. How can I worship with people and be a brother or sister to people that I'm not a friend with? I worship with so many people, and I realized why they could treat me bad is because they weren't friendly to me. They didn't know me. You can persecute what you don't know easier. You know why people don't want to know? How people want to shoot people from afar and kill innocent people? Because it would be hard for them most of the time to kill people they know. And that's the problem. How can I worship you and plan to spend my life, eternity with you? I don't know. I don't even know where you live, who you are. We're done with that. That's the old method of doing the current destructive, suicidal society that we live in. We must do society and we must do church a more social way where people actually connected to people. They're concerned with their well-being. They're concerned with their job, with their finances. They're concerned, are you doing okay or not? Well, you should have a church where somebody gets sick and nobody don't even know until after the person is buried. And then you hear, well, your member just got buried last month. What? That has happened. Because there's no connection. Nobody cares. But that's the world that the older generation created. And I can be challenging this. I'll show you it. Hopefully I've shown you enough. They've created that world. And that world is whipping their buttocks. They're being beaten up by it. Because they live in a cold world. And many of them, they can't take it anymore because they're so lonely and sad. And they're killing themselves. So we can't go with that. We have to break from that. And I'm being very clear here, not mincing words. Lastly, I say recreational. Our recreational life has to be to recreate in us something good. The Greens have gone recreating without us. And so that's what it is. We have to recreate. And so I say, Brother Green, where are you going for camping? You say, I'm going to some campsite near Pittsburgh. I was like, I never heard about campsite. Probably I've seen it, but I never heard. Because what happened? I never camped in that area. But you have to do that. You have to sometimes just stop what you're doing and go recreate. But you're not planning to recreate in Puerto Rico anymore this year? No. Probably we need to send you on a mission trip. Things change a little bit there. But you have to take time for your family and yourself to stop what you're doing, taking nature, sweat a little bit, do whatever, recreate. And if it's winter, yeah, go ahead and enjoy the slopes. Send me a picture, I won't join. We close in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 3 through 9. We close with this. Close in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 3. You have to take time for yourself. You have to take time to make a salad, cook some food. Don't always go to restaurants. But recreation can be restaurants sometimes. We don't believe in recreation and eating, but I say take time for your family. But you have to also take time to prepare your own food. Take care of yourself. Soak your foot in some salt water or some hot water sometime. Take care of yourself sometime. Life is better that way. Don't be like the first generation. They work until they drop dead. Never really enjoyed any of it. They pillage and take everything, and then they die with it. You know, leave some back for somebody that come after you. Don't pillage the whole of nature. If you can plant a tree, plant a tree. Do something good. Don't think it's a hippie that doing that. It's okay. So notice here, we close on the start. Looking at my time. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 3 through 9. 1 Kings chapter 10 chapter 1 Kings, verse 3 through 9. And Solomon told her all her question, and there was not anything hid from the king, which he told her not. And when the queen of Sheba had seen all Solomon's wisdom, and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, and their cupbearers, and his ascent by which he went up the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. So she, a leader, a queen herself, she come to see how he's running business. And he running business blew her all away. He had created something that was his own thinking. I'm not saying this is the way you need to think, but Christ referenced it. Christ says, in all his glory, Solomon was not arrayed like even the lily. But still, it's significant to note that Christ had to make mention because this had to be a very impressive thing. It says that the scepter, Ellen G. White says, passed from Egypt, not Sheba, so to speak, but Egypt, and it went to Israel. And then from Israel, it went to Babylon. So we talk about greatness. Solomon became so great that gold was viewed as nothing. Like, what's that, gold? But so when you think about that, we know he veered off. But this was in his own thinking. He curated a world that even kings were impressed with. In other words, you can impress us about anybody that doesn't have nothing. But we have somebody that's living at the upper echelon of society, the top in their country, and they come and they're blown out. That is impressive. And we know this was not the case because of Solomon. This was more so the case because of David. David had done the hard work, tripped up at the end, done the hard work, and Solomon came in after him and built upon all that war and stuff like that, that David had set things up a certain way. In what David could not finish, Solomon finished and then ended up blowing it. And so, just like, not talking about the bad that came after, but in just this instance, where the scepter passed to him, he created a world that was good for him and good for those around him. And you know it was good for those around him because she says even the cupbearers, who was the lower rung, was blessed. So what does that tell me? That tells me that we'll never live in a world, definitely, as I say, that's where I break from the hippies, definitely. We never live in a world where they're not going to be cupbearers. But we can live in a world where those who are on the lower rung of society don't have to live in such dangerous environments and dangerous ways, and they have to be shuffling in the Congress and Senate to try to secure up some money for the retirees and stuff like that. We can live in a world that has a better social net for everybody. So that means those even at the lower rung of society does live better than in other countries. And if that's not going to be for the general society because the politicians won't do what they're supposed to do, that can be for me and you. We can make sure that we're not talking about big life, but we're not talking about suffering. We're talking about living a decent life, a modest life where you can be comfortable, that when winter comes, like the proverb, virtuous woman, you don't have to worry about the winter, like, oh man, it's going to be cold, and how am I going to warm myself? When summer comes, you don't have to worry about cooling yourself. You don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry because you're thinking ahead and you're making certain moves I want you to start thinking how to make those moves. And as we go through the rest of the year, and I continue to talk about this, I hope that I can get feedback with you online as to either what move you're thinking of doing or what move you've already done. Let me go to read the rest of the text. And she said to the king, it was true reported that I heard in mine own land of the acts and thy wisdom. So she said, we've been hearing about this wherever. This is to call missionary work. Howbeit I believe not the words until I came, and my eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told me, that wisdom and prosperity exceed the fame which I heard. So she says, it's one thing to hear, it's another thing when you see. So you want to build a life like that. You want to build a life that in your home, because that's the number one thing you have control of in your home, you set things up a way that is good for you. As I say, the way I try to even set up my house, I set up my house that I can walk in the dark. I'm supposed to know where everything is at, even the dark, so I don't trip. Right? I don't do it all the time, but sometimes I walk in the dark. If I need to get to somewhere, sometimes I don't want to close it. Especially if I don't want to turn on the light and wake myself up too much. So I use a little night light, and I don't want to turn on the light because guess what happened? I don't want to be fully awake because then I might not want to fall back asleep. And like this morning that happened to me. I go wake up at 6:30 and I could not fall back asleep. And I woke up and I'm like, man, I could use the extra hour plus. It just go for, so sometimes I don't want to wake myself up because I don't find it easy sometimes to fall back asleep. I started thinking, and I do a lot of thinking. So notice here, happy are thy men, and happy are these servants. Notice, even the servants are happy, which stand continually before thee, and to hear thy wisdom. So they say, even the people that's catching something. I used to hear about people when Warren Buffett speak, people listen. Because what happened? He's been in the business for years, and he survived. There's people come and go up and down, and crash and burn. So these men that's just here and there, you can imagine when he talk, people probably say, what did he say today? What was the wisdom he was dropping? Because he's dropping wisdom to king. He's meeting with kings and princes and rulers. And they'll be like, listen, we can do good if we just hear the wisdom he's dropping. Right? Important. Blessed is the Lord thy God, which delighteth in thee, to set thee on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel. Must love Israel. That's the only reason to put a good leader. People have said that so when you have a bad leader, it's because of punishment from God. When you have a wicked leader, it's a punishment from God to the people. When we have a good leader, that's a blessing from God. She thinks that also. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, therefore made he thee king to do judgment and justice. She conclusion at the end of the day, no matter what you get from what she's saying, she concludes it's not about just the money and the flow of stuff. Remember I said to you about the Beatitudes? You study the Beatitudes and there's money in there. And someone said, what are you talking about? I thought you talking about character development. There's prosperity, there's blessing. There's a good life in there. There's nobility in there. There's kingly behavior, deportment, and lifestyle in there. And Joy said, if you follow the things that she writes, you can live as a king and a queen. You're going to put in work, she said, that's the only thing, hard work. But you live as a king and a queen. So, what are you talking about? Listen, I remember when I was younger, and I first went to a Whole Foods, I'd be like, oh, that's the things I buy. I didn't make Whole Foods money, but that's how I would eat. And then I go to it and say, you know, I think this is just a supermarket for rich people. Now, I was talking to Brother Green and say he hasn't been even to, when he goes into Florida, he doesn't even go to a Whole Foods. He just go to the regular store because the regular store now start carrying all the premium products. You know what I'm saying? You think about where do you see, just think about this, right? And I close on this, about creating a better world. Think about this. When you think about what locations you see vegan, vegetarian restaurants, poor places or rich places? It's rich places. Who is trying to take care of their body? People with money. Why? If I'm planning to live, I enjoy the money I have, I don't want to eat no garbage food. I'm going to take care of myself. So when you think about it, so she said this, and I've seen it with my very own eyes, that when you start to live a certain way and think a certain way, you're touching on things. The other time, poor people and people that live in the worst type of lifestyle, they don't even think about it. They just drag through life and being slaughtered. We don't want to be like that. We want to create an environment that social environment is more friendly. We want to live that when we get older, that we don't suffer from being disadvantaged. We want to create a kind of less destructive world for ourselves. As I go through the rest of this quarter, we talk about kingdom building. I want you to think about this, that we have to seek, imagine, and apply new solution, new technology, new everything to make sure that we can set ourselves up a certain way. Because what do we do here? We do preparation for life and eternity. I'll be clear, we're different from what the regular churches out there do. We just don't preach and just tell you, just prepare to die and go to heaven or hell or whatever. We don't tell you, try to live the best life you can live here. Get a taste of the promised land, like Abraham, so that you can really feel like, say, okay, the promised land is, I could live there. Don't suffer unnecessary, please. It's not necessary. Don't live like people who are just pagans and they don't know why they're living. Live a good life. Live like a king or queen. Live like Solomon. Be blessed, that even those around you, they said they're blessed. You're not going to be a multi-millionaire, but we don't want to live that life anyhow. We just want to live a modest, good life. May God bless you for this week. May His face really shine upon you, and may you not only seek the blessing, but you may do everything to seek blessings in your life. May God bless you. Thanks for being with me here.
Please take your hymnals in hand and turn to hymn number 350 as we close on the type of social environment we want around us. Again, please take your hymnals and turn to hymn number 350. Hymn number 350. Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love, the fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above. Before our Father's throne, we pour our ardent prayers, our fears, our hopes, our aims, our rod, our comfort and our cares. We share our mutual woes, our mutual burdens bear, and often for each other flows the sympathizing tear. When we are sundered apart, it gives us inward pain, but we shall still be joined in heart and hope to meet again.
Thank you for joining us here at Covenant Avenue Church, preparing you for life and eternity. We're grateful that you have partaken of this Bible study. I hope it was a blessing to you. At this time, I would like to invite you to pray with us as we close the evening. Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful and thankful, dear Lord, for helping us set us up not only at the present but for the future. We know, dear Heavenly Father, that sometimes we don't consider the future as coming as quickly as we think, but it does come quickly, and we have to understand that time does go by, and we need to make sure that we don't live only at the present, but we save funds and energy and for the future. Help us to not only be able to help us in trying to save our resources, but also our bodies, and also help us to be a blessing to others as a form of a service, and we become, as individuals in the church, more valuable to the community. We become an asset to them. Help us, dear Heavenly Father, understand that we're going to get older, and it's good for us not to consider what we're going to do with our health and our bodies. Help us to submit to you and your ways, and we'll live better now, not only now when young, but also later on as we get older. We're grateful, dear Lord, for your word. We pray that those online may consider the Bible study and think about the future. We pray at this time, dear Lord, that they may be blessed with your word. We're grateful, dear Lord, for spending the day here. We ask for traveling mercies as we now depart and go home. Bring us back next week so we can worship you again. In Christ I pray. Amen. Thank you for joining us here at Covenant Adventist Church, preparing you for life and eternity. Join us next week as we continue to study the Sabbath School. We're up to lesson number 3, Understanding Human Nature. And join us again for divine service as we continue to study character development. That will be our topic for the quarter. Please join us and stay safe, and we'll see you next week.